A message from our sponsor, Ramp Stop Marine Service. Ramp Stop Marine Service is a family-owned and operated boat store located at mile marker 757 on the Ohio River. Since 2005, their mission has been to support and encourage the inland mariner by providing midstream delivery services on the Ohio River from Louisville to Cairo and the Mississippi from Hickman to Cape Girardeau. By operating their own grocery store and supply warehouse tailored to the needs of vessels operating on our inland rivers, they can provide you with what your boats and crews need to keep moving. Ramp Stop has also begun working with launch services and midstream fuelers on the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. So next time you talk with your launch service or midstream fueler, ask if they can provide you with groceries from Ramp Stop Marine Service. Check them out on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, or visit www.rampstop.com. Welcome back to Between the Levees. I'm joined today by Brian Gerk, a Marine Corps veteran that I met at AEP when he was a port engineer. He is currently the Vice President of Engineering at Reliant Maritime Solutions. Mr. Gerk, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Tim. How are you, sir?
Doing just great. How about yourself?
It's good to see you, brother. Proud of your show.
Thank you.
Good work you're doing.
I appreciate that. Well, you know how these start, man. Tell me where you were born.
Fort Walton Beach, Florida, 1970.
What did your parents do for a living?
My dad was in the Air Force, active duty, and my mom was, stay at home, typical type stuff.
What did your dad do in the Air Force?
He was like a flight mechanic, refueling on aircraft.
Okay. And what was life growing up down there?
Well, I only spent 6 months of my entire life at Fort Walton Beach, and then he got orders to go to Anchorage, Alaska at Elmendorf Air Force Base.
How long were you up there?
I spent 19 years there. My dad still lives in Alaska.
Well, tell me about growing up there.
Beautiful countryside. If you love the outdoors, fishing, hunting, hiking, skiing, just getting out into the woods, it's the perfect place.
How many kids were in your class in school?
I went to private school most of my life, so, no more than 15, 20. Until I reached high school age.
Well, what did you like? I mean, I know you kind of said how it was growing up, but were you drawn to anything in school? Did you play any sports? Tell me about Alaska.
I played hockey during the winter time. We played baseball in the summer as kids. I really didn't get into football much. I was more of a hockey fan and a baseball fan than anything, We lived out after so many years. We lived out into the mountainside. So, you had the mountains and trees and rivers as your backyard. We didn't have much TV. So most of my time was spent in the woods with my dog, Chief.
Were you drawn to anything in school?
Not really. I had one of my primary subjects was history. And as it turns out, I'm enrolled in college right now, getting my bachelor's of arts in history.
So you finished up high school. You said at 19 you left Alaska. Was that into the Marine Corps?
No, I went to California for a couple of years, goofed around, and then the summer of 1994 is when I joined the Marine Corps. Went to boot camp.
Tell me about boot camp.
I was reminiscing over Denny's interview here not too long ago, and I know he's a Hollywood Marine. The real guys go to PI in Parris Island, South Carolina. That's where I went. You get off the bus, you're nervous as hell. The drill instructor gets on the bus. He says, in accordance to commanding general, we want to welcome you to Parris Island, South Carolina, MCRD. And then he starts screaming at you to get off, get off, get off. And, nobody knows what the hell to do, just like Denny says, you just running for the tree line. So 3 months of good training. I went in I turned 24 the first week of boot camp. I was the second oldest in my platoon. The next guy above me was 26 years old, and the rest of them are 18 to 20, whatever, 22. Spent 8 years in the Marine Corps, had a great time all over the countryside. I spent some time in the South Pacific, and I went to Europe for a bit.
What was your MOS?
I was an 0161 postal clerk, handled mail for the military.
And where all were you posted?
Obviously I did my basic training and then went to do my MOS school in Indianapolis, Indiana. My first duty station was Okinawa, Japan for 2 years. Of that 2 years in Japan, I spent 6 months forward deployed in South Korea on a combat service support detachment. It was originally just supposed to be for a month and a half or so, and there were 3 back-to-back CSSDs, and me and a buddy of mine, Chris Rickford, we loved it so much we just stayed for the additional 2. So, they didn't have to send more gear or 2 additional Lance Corporals over there. They just had to send an NCO.
Oh, where did you land after the Marine Corps?
Got out of the Marine Corps in Barstow, California, and I went towards Houston, Texas, where I had a friend of mine that I served with in Camp Lejeune was living, and I actually had a job lined up, but it didn't last very long. It was with Farmers Insurance. I felt like a telemarketer, it wasn't my style. It didn't fit me well. So I wound up leaving it. And I had another friend of mine that lives in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, that I served with in Camp Lejeune again. And he told me about a barge company by the name of Memco that was hiring deckhands. So I packed everything I had in my truck and hauled tail up to Missouri. And that was about December of 2002 is when I filled my application out. And January of the following year in 2003, I stepped foot on my first boat, which was the Chris Parsonage.
Where was that?
They were running the Mississippi River.
Had you thought about a towboat before that point in life?
I never knew what a towboat was till I got hired in. Growing up in Alaska, it's just not a common item, that you see.
Well, tell me about deckhand onboarding and I guess your first trip on deck.
It was a little nerve-wracking, not knowing what to do. But being a Marine, strong-headed, fail forward, I was ready to do whatever it took to get a paycheck. So I grasped it fairly fast, I did my first trip on the Chris Parsonage, and then my regular boat turned out to be it's an old Robert Stout. It was an old 7200 EMD boat. I decked on it for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years. And, most people coming up to the deck, they figure out, what they really want to do in their career, whether they're going to stay, go, move back to the engine room. At that time, they had oilers, assistants, and then chiefs in the engine room. And then people went to the wheelhouse, and I chose the engineering part. I walked back and talked to the chief, said, "Hey, how do I get back here?" He told me the route. You come back, you help them out with items, you go make rounds, you do the regular round routine of draining water off fuel tanks and air tanks and taking readings for them and filling out their logs and coming out with special assignments, when he had stuff to do. And, I took the initiative and done that. And he wrote me a recommendation letter to be in the Oilers program. 20 years later, here I am.
What was the most surprising thing you saw out there on that first year or so?
Just the way the marine industry functions, and the people think it's a big organization out here, but the whole inland marine program, throughout all the companies is not very big. So just seeing the high water from low water to failures on a boat, I really didn't see my first dry dock until I was in the Oilers program. Thought that was really cool. I actually stood there and physically watched them pull a shaft out of a boat. I'd never seen that done before. Pulling wheels and how you manipulate all that stuff, and really cool stuff. I think I got my mechanical abilities from my dad. When he moved up to Alaska, he got out of the Air Force, went into the Army National Guard, and turned wrenches on Huey H1s for the National Guard. I go out there on weekends and downtime, that I had at school and stuff as a kid, and tinker around in the helicopters and play around with the collective and the joystick and flip buttons, while they turn wrenches on helicopters. And
So, Brian, are towboats as exciting as you might have expected helicopters to be?
I spent a lot of time out there with my dad in the mechanic shop of the Army base he worked at, on days that I'd have off from school or weekends that he was tinkering around out there overhauling ships. That's where I got my start from, I think, and I think about it, there's a lot of responsibility in what we do out here mechanically, but you talk about overhauling a helicopter or an aircraft, and you put them guys up there 2,000-3,000 feet up in the air. That's a lot of risk involved. Not that we don't have it out here ourselves, but I just didn't want that on my shoulders at that time. I took some leave back some years ago when I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan, and come back to Alaska. I actually got an opportunity to go up and fly with my dad. And of course, it wasn't after any type of mechanical fixes that they've done. It's just that pilots and had to do some touch and goes, what they call. They have some grid coordinates that they're listed on a paper. They got to go find them, set down, take it back off again. I thought that was really cool. That was the first time I got to fly with my dad. Of course, I was active duty and I had that opportunity to, but I just wanted to choose my own path in life, and that's what led me to the next layers of my evolution through life, whether it be the Marine Corps or choosing towboat career. My whole family's always been Army or the Navy or the Air Force, and nobody has ever ventured towards the Marine Corps. And I was the first. I felt that drive. I felt the desire, and I made it happen. It was tough. The Marine Corps makes it tough, and it's there for a reason. And that's why they have that slogan, the few, the proud, the Marines. And not everybody makes it that goes in. I think in our platoon, we started out with well over 100 guys in the squad bay. And we may have graduated 60 something, So they drop quick, but it's all determination and heart, and it doesn't matter how much muscle mass you got. It's all in your heart and your brain.
Well, was towboating just sort of the next opportunity that popped up for you? I know you weren't enjoying that insurance gig.
Yeah, it didn't work well. I felt like a telemarketer, and that's just not my style. That's why I don't ever talk to them people, because it's aggravating. And I didn't really have anything lined up after the insurance gig fell through. And then it just a stroke of luck and the God's grace that towboating fell into my lap, because I got a phone call shortly after that from a friend of mine, Shane. He told me about the Memco Deckhand job there at Cape Girardeau. I loaded everything I had in my truck and blazed the trail north.
Yeah, my career started similarly. It wasn't a friend in the industry, but a random ad I found and responded to. Like you said, a stroke of luck. It sure was.
He worked at a place there in Cape, and he worked with a guy that was married to a girl in the Memco office. That's how he found out.
Okay.
I mean, it's just word of mouth by word of mouth, and then here I am.
Yeah. And here we are. So maybe we can reconvene in another 20 years or so.
Yeah, I'm 52. I'll be 53 next week. Shoot, I still got 15 years in me, 20 maybe. And nobody in my family, we didn't ever even know what towboating was. I mean, I didn't for sure, but I knew that I needed a job. I needed an income, and I was willing to give it a go. And 20 years later, we're still stroking miles up and down the river, and fixing equipment and keeping guys safe. And that's what it's all about.
Roger that, man. Well, how did your career advance once you got into the oiler program?
I moved up the ladder fairly quickly. I was always studious and willing to learn, and I kept a lot of good knowledge in my head, and I paid attention a lot. So I was made chief engineer within about 7-8 years. The last big boat that I rode, formerly known as the Miss KD, now it's the Mark Canoy. It's a big triple screw EMD boat. It's one of the biggest boats I ever rode. I remember picking it up when AEP bought it, and the shaft alleys are so big you get turned around. I mean, it's like monstrous space.
So you were part of the AEP acquisition then.
Yes.
How was that? Tell me about that.
It's nerve wracking. You think you're working for a company and you're going to retire from one, and then you find out, the carpet's fixing to be pulled out from underneath you, and the unknowns and what's fixing to happen. But it turned out to be pretty decent. The guys that we fell in line with at ACBL really turned out to be some really great guys. I worked for a gentleman by the name of Mark Duplantis in the Gulf. It was a little nerve wracking coming into a bunch of new guys, but transition is a part of life, and change is just, the next day. So
talk a little bit about your transition shoreside.
That was about 10 years ago. Back when I was still riding boats on that. It was when we took it over, we renamed it the Jeff Stover. High water event had landed my boat in Paducah, Kentucky, because it was such a big girl and she drafted so heavy on the stern. They tied her up, and they needed some additional help in the Gulf at Convent. It was a recent acquisition for AEP back in the day. They built that place and started it. I think it was around 2006, if memory serves. So they needed some port engineer shoreside help. I was a little reluctant to go, but Joe Brantley and all the port engineers here in Paducah wouldn't leave me alone until I said yes. So I reluctantly went down, and over time of going down there, I kept my schedule of 28, and then there was a guy that would relieve me. It kind of grew on me, and I enjoyed it. I was able to pass on knowledge to the guys in the fleet, or the redelivery boats that they had down there in the Gulf. They had a bunch of canal boats that they run. Guy that we worked for, he was the operations manager, Tim Callahan, offered me a position. And talking to my wife, I took it. It gave me an opportunity to be at home, hang out with my wife and my son. So it was a good opportunity, and things just grew from there. And my knowledge base has gone up significantly.
What's a day in the life of a port engineer?
Oh, you wake up, phone calls all day, emails. There's always preventive maintenance and scheduled items to take care of. Things come across the airwaves that, things are going to break. It's machinery.
Plenty enough boats to keep you busy, I guess.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Well, so the transition to ACBL, after that happened, how long did you stay with ACBL?
Probably in the neighborhood of 7 years, I think.
Because I feel like once we switched over to those roles, we kind of fell out of touch. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
After where were you based after the transition?
I stayed at Convent.
It's all kind of a blur, but anyway.
Yeah.
So did you go straight to Reliant Maritime after ACBL?
I did. I needed a new direction, and the guys at Reliant, they're really good to work with. Dave Abney and Jeremy Shot Tardy, really a bunch of good guys. We got a great team, both on the river and shoreside, and it's going to take some ironing out, but when you got enough experience and people that will willing to pitch in and do the work, anything's possible.
How long have you been with them now?
Not a year yet. August will be a year for me.
Okay. Well, let's switch topics then. You said you're married. How long have you been married?
October this year will be 19 years.
Good for you.
Yeah.
And you have children?
Yeah, I got two. I got one 17-year-old son. He drives around with me on certain projects and goes to the boats and hangs out, and Then I have a 33-year-old daughter that lives in Missouri still.
Is it looking like your son's going to follow you into the industry?
Probably not. I think he's got his hopes and dreams on IT and marine biology type stuff when he gets through college. He'll be a senior in high school next year. He's looking at going to do some studying at LSU after that. So we'll see how things progress.
Do you still live in Louisiana?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we just moved to a nice little place out in Plaquemine, Louisiana, in Iberville Parish, which is just below Baton Rouge a little bit on the West Bank. I've been there just over a year. Beautiful place in the bayou. You
Yeah.
can't get much better than that.
I don't live too far. Actually, a job in Plaquemine moved me out here to the Baton Rouge area in late '09. But I guess next time you're in town, let me know.
Yeah, well, I had to come up to Illinois to do a job on a boat. We crossed the Grosset Bridge out there in Plaquemine. A lot of, towboaters know where that's at. And I just live a few miles from that. We can hear the boats in the ICW as they pass by.
You said you're in college now.
Yeah, 52 years old, you never expect yourself to go back to school, but anything's possible. You put your mind to it. I started out, I was going to do a bachelor's of business degree. I was in my first semester and I had a class. It was American Native Indian history, and it really spurred my knowledge base for high school history. And I changed my degree, and I don't ever know what I'll do with the bachelor's of arts, but at my age, what difference does it make? I was able to use my GI Bill from my Marine Corps days and having a good time learning and, hitting the books again.
What program are you in, or with what school?
It was American Public University. So it's a military based school. A lot of people from the military, active duty or vets, or, their spouses or kids, go to this college event. I'm not actually sure where their actual campus is, but I know they do have one somewhere.
So it's all online.
Yep.
All right. How much longer do you have?
Probably another year and a half, 2 years left, about halfway through. I don't do very many. I do 3 classes a semester, and that's about enough for me, working the type of job that we do, answering the phone most of the day. I get home, you're zapped mentally and physically from running and gunning. And so I started out my first semester. Me and my wife lined up 5 classes, and that was just way too much. And I knocked it down to 3, and that's more manageable.
Yeah, I think when I did my MBA, I was just doing one course. But anyway, do you have any thoughts or messages for the industry or about the industry that you've lived in for I mean, just over 20 years?
Yeah, I feel grateful for the guys that look out for one another. You hear all these stories. I was at the River Bell ceremony up here in Paducah here not long ago, and they had the awards for I forget the name of the towboat and the crew, but they rescued a guy from another boat. You hear stories like that, and that's what I said earlier. All these companies out here on the river, and everybody pulls together to get the job done, and that's a big highlight from our industry. That no matter who you are, who you work for, what you do, the next guy in the next boat's gonna help you out and whatever you need done. So, also I hear all these visions of new technologies coming out on towboats, and 20 years ago, guys would have just laughed at you, but you see all the innovation and cool technologies coming out. We've come a long way in my 20 years. I can't imagine the guys have been out here 40, 50 years, back when they still had the old telephones you had to pay on your paycheck, to call home and stuff. And now everybody's got a smartphone. Hell, back when I started, I didn't even have a cell phone. They had a cell phone in the wheelhouse. You crewed 5 minutes a day, you could talk and call home on, or borrow the mate's or chief's, cell phone, whatever. But, technology's gone a long way.
Well, for the sake of the viewers or listeners, let me know. Give me a few examples of the improvements you're seeing popping up these days.
You got good alarm systems on your engines now. You got high-speed dial-up computers, to keep your logs and download and look up stuff for parts and supplies and stuff. You're able to email once back and forth to your shoreside personnel. If you had problems with mechanical issues or just thoughts on your head, you could pick up a phone and call somebody.
How different was it when you started in the oiler program?
Oh gosh. Well, like I told you, that not many people on a boat had a cell phone. Back then, you had roaming fees. So, and back then, I don't even know if they had that many cell phone towers either, to point of fact. And I can remember I forget the name of the cell phone provider, but they were wanting to charge me international rates when I got below the Baton Rouge Bridge. And, I called them. I said, last time I checked, Baton Rouge and Louisiana was still part of the continental US,
You may have to convince some people of that, but anyway.
Yeah. So, a lot of technology has come up to speed on a lot of our equipment. The tier levels have gone up, and now there's EPA stuff on engines on brand new equipment. It's really impressive the lengths that we've come and strides we've made to keep our environment clean. And that's always been a sticking point for me. I'll knock on wood, out of my 21 years, I've never had an environmental incident. I encourage everybody that watches this, or the guys that work for me, pay attention to what you're doing. A lot of us fish and hunt and take our kids to parks on the river, and just keep our area clean. That would be a big point that I push out. You hear all the stories back 20-30 years ago where they just dump their trash and bilges to the river, and that's just not the way we are anymore. So,
Mr. Gerk, I think that'll do it, man.
Cool.
I appreciate your time this afternoon.
My pleasure, Tim. It's always good to see you, brother.
You too. I'll get back to work.
Take care.
Too.
Bye.
Thanks.